Life is hectic, demanding, and doesn't stop. When honest with ourselves, we must confess we often don't know what the hell we're doing. The LARKCAST is an ongoing conversation about the inclusive and mischievous nature of God's presence through the lens of all the things that make up this phenomenon we refer to as life. Astonishing grace and refreshing honesty collide right here for your weekly encouragement.
3, 2, and 1. Welcome back to the LARKCAST. As we ended last week's episode saying that this was a two-parter, you are now going to jump right into the middle of the conversation that we were having. So this would be part 2. Enjoy. And so for me, like being able to wrestle with all the other kind of pieces, like the surrounding pieces with Jesus at the center, I still was still able to kind of stay anchored to him, because way, way back in my story, there was a genuine interaction with him. Now, I went into the whole bit, dude. The institution bought in. I was a part of it, right? And really kind of was like a stripping down to get me back to the center, to get me back to Jesus himself. But I've often wondered about this just in relation to the phenomena of deconstruction. And I think a lot of people just have a relationship with the church or the tradition of church in the West.
Yeah.
So it's easy to walk away from.
Agreed. One of the ways
I remember back in when I first started out in the ministry world. After a few years of being a youth pastor, I took my first paid job in the church world as an associate pastor, the church on the other side of town. And this was climbing the ladder. You guys know how that works, right? You're kind of moving upstream now. You've proved yourself. And one of my responsibilities was also to oversee all the student ministries. So I started raising up, training these various, middle school pastor, high school pastor, college pastor. You get what I'm saying? And I remember our high school dude coming to me, and he kind of opened up, and he was kind of broke down this one night, man. And I said, man, what's going on? I thought maybe, done something, what I'm saying? He's going to get himself canceled but instead he goes, man, you have this passion for Jesus and the truth and what you're doing. And you've got this story, this past. And I don't have that. I grew up in the church world my whole life. And I want to have what you have, but I don't, man. And it's because I don't have that past. I've always been a good kid, and, he's kind of going through his checklist. And he's using all this to basically say, I've never had the encounter that led to the passion that you have. And I need that. And he was at a point, man, where he was thinking he needed to walk away, go sow a bunch of wild oats, get a few mug shots, taken. And then, right, he'll have that encounter and he can come back in. And I remember when he started sharing that, I'm just going to be honest, I was young in ministry. And so my brain started racing, because I'm like, crap, man, I'm the leader here. I'm supposed to have the answers, and I don't know how to respond to this dude. I'm starting to feel kind of stuck, what am I going to say when he stops talking? And I'll never forget it. I just prayed, Lord, give me words. I don't know what to say here. And I'm quietly praying this, and he gets done. And I looked at him and I said, man, what you just shared, I totally understand. I hear where you're coming from. I see the logical connections you're making. I said, but it doesn't compute. And he goes, what do you mean? I said, well, it doesn't make sense, because you're telling me you don't have a story, when in reality you do have a story. We both have an equal, broken, flawed, frail, trying to be God, lover of control story.
Yep.
I just pursued mine with rebelliousness, and you pursued yours with self-righteousness.
I was thinking the same thing.
It's the same story, bro.
It is, but
And
it's a harder story to detect in the church because we've not differentiated the gospel from moralism.
exactly, which is why I think the Apostle Paul is so damn adamant about this in
And
Galatians.
angry and angry.
Yes. And I think we've got to do the due diligence, man, of looking at this and not forgetting this for the rest of our days.
Mm-hmm.
Because the enslavement of religion, man, it's real, it's blinding,
Mm-hmm.
and it has drastic effects in its dismantling of people and homes and friendships and entire societies.
Mm-hmm.
And that was what it was, man, for this dude. And so I'll just say two things, and it's all ties in, Jameson, what you brought up in the question. Number one, I was able to just kind of remind him that hey, in the garden when it says, like, if you eat of this tree, surely die. And he goes, yeah. And I'm like, did they die? Well, no. I mean, they were still there. Like, so they didn't die. They ate the fruit, Adam and Eve, but then they went on to hide and then even have a conversation with God. They didn't fall over. Yeah. I'm like, so maybe that word die there doesn't mean what we often think it means. And you start to see that, and you start to press into, like, the nature of humanity, right, in its blindness, not separation, but alienation, you know what I mean, from reality. That's what takes over. That's what took over there. And that's why what happened to Adam and Eve has happened to every person since. I'm saying all that to say nothing in humanity leads to life, because humanity at its core, right, is riddled in death apart from the spirit that brings life. And so seeing that, he was able to look and go, hey, man, do you believe in Jesus? Yeah. Well, if you did, that didn't come from you, bro. That came from somewhere else outside of you. The fact that we're even having this conversation is evidence of a living, breathing God, the one that Paul encountered that led to this passion, the one that I encountered that led to the passion that you've seen in me. Yeah, that also happened in you. You didn't arrive at this place that you're in on your own. Nothing in you would pursue this. So rejoice in this, man. Rejoice in this good news that you were as equally flawed and foolish as me. And a good God, right, encountered your life. You encountered him. And then secondly, I'll say this. Where did that happen? Where did that happen for him, for me, for you, for all of us? Where did it happen? When you look in Galatians 1 and Paul tells the story, it happens in the gospel. It happens in that news, that revelation. That's why it's so important that we hold up the pure, unadulterated, unfiltered, undiluted news of Jesus, our union with God. Man, it's in that we have the encounter. It's in that we experience something, man, that we can't shake. And if you just up and throw that out, dude, and walk away, I would agree with you, Tony. You might not have actually encountered Jesus in the gospel. You might have just encountered religion in the church. And those are two different things.
Yeah, growing up, you just saw people get rescued from irreligion. Stories like mine, coming out of rebellion. I never really heard anyone get up or get, brought onto a stage of, like, someone who's trusting their own righteousness.
Yes.
The actual righteousness of Jesus. And so we're always looking for some story of transformation, and it was always out of irreligion and rebellion. And so to hear some of the stories that start coming out, like Paul's, Philippians 2, dude, I trusted my own righteousness. I've been trusting my own righteousness. And you know what? For, like, a pastor to be like, dude, this whole system, like, actually really provides a nice place for you to hide in religion and feel nice and safe.
Yep. It's true, man. And it's everywhere.
It's everywhere.
I mean, Paul's dealing with a small little movement of Judaizers. I mean, I'm just going to go out on a limb and say it. I live in the real world. I travel in the real world. Bro, the spirit of the Judaizer, the teaching of the Judaizer, it's not only welcomed, it's straight up celebrated. And what is most popular is what is most popular in the name of Christianity.
Yeah.
It got mastered in the Enlightenment, and now it's being manufactured widely. It's not like it's everywhere. Bro, and it's throughout. You can't get away from it. It's been solidified in that way, and you're replacing the gospel the minute you say Jesus but right. Like we did that whole but series, and there is no such thing as truth when you add but to that sentence, to the word, to the name of Jesus, because Paul writes the name of Jesus the way you would write the name of God. And then he says he's one with the Father. He does all of these things, which means you cannot fundamentally change who Jesus is. Meaning, what you do cannot verify or validate that he loves you. It can't make it true or untrue. It's part of who God is for God to have loved you, included and invited you into his life. You cannot, like, these are not like opinions. These are theological, doctrinal, bedrock level truths that Paul is yelling almost about in this letter, right? Like that moment where he says, I wish that while you were circumcising yourself, you'd slip and lop the whole thing off. Like you can't sanitize what Paul's trying to do here. He's so upset. And this is, I got to read this to you guys. We must affirm the insight that Jesus is Lord. Full stop. Along with all of its entailments, and then protect it, vigilantly resisting all other candidates for this status. In parentheses, people, and especially Christians, seem to love to avoid and to marginalize and to obscure God's gift of God's very being to us in Jesus for all sorts of odd reasons. God's gift of God's very being to us in Jesus. And so what this means for all of us is that the truth of the gospel, why Paul makes it clear that it's a revelation and not something you learned or thought about or got taught or figured out or saw with your own eyes. He's saying it's Jesus revealing himself. That's actually really good news, because at the end of the day, every other option leads to a self-referential claim itself. Like there is no such thing as a non-self-referential claim about truth, about what's at the bottom core of everything, except the only one that can actually hold the water of that circular argument is Jesus. There is no other way of making sense of anything. And I think that Paul's adamant here. He's like, no, God's gift of God's very being is what God gave you in Jesus. And he says he gave it to the world.
Yeah. There's no but there.
No but.
Yeah. It's almost like he's looking at him and saying, you guys think you're faithful followers of Jesus, and you don't realize that you're actually living in good faith to an imaginary God. You're a slave to religion, and you're enslaving other people to religion. And not only are you missing out on life, they're missing out on life. And what's insane to think of is that they're just completely oblivious to this and even fighting it. And again, I mean, it's like, wow. Now fast forward 2,000 years. You see why he's adamant about what you were just saying, Jameson. That if you don't protect this vital core bedrock truth, all else is lost.
Mm-hmm.
It's lost.
There's not a more powerful bewitching than a moralistic bewitching.
Yeah, I would agree.
Everybody is drinking the virtuous Kool-Aid. It's across the board.
Yep.
Left, right, doesn't matter. And I think in particular, the church is very susceptible to moralistic arguments because we failed to make a distinction between the good news of Jesus and the good things that we bring or think we bring to the table. And so I think maybe I knew it before, but man, these last 6-7 years, and Paul in particular, his story, Jesus's parables, have been so good, for me, for sure. And it's hard. It's hard on the outside to really even like discern, someone who's trusting, themselves. But that's what's crazy is like we all are, we all are. And, just when I was new to Christ, I've said this before on the LARKCAST, I read the phrase old man, just in terms of that like rebellious, law breaking, middle finger straight to the heavens man, the old man. But the guy who coined the phrase is the Apostle Paul. He didn't have a rebellious streak. He didn't have an irreligious streak. That old man, in light of that, can only be defined as that part of us that just loves to control. And that can express itself in rebellious, irreligious, and religious, ways. So, man, it's such an easy trap. It's such an easy trap because our own hearts drift that way. That's why, like, when people define sin as like transgression and they talk about like be killing sin or sin will be killing you, like we got to really like fight sin and all this other stuff. They're talking about sin in terms of like transgression, like little ways, little behaviors, right? Where we're just kind of like, breaking a rule here, maybe a harming behavior there. But sin, like capital S sin, that wants to just be Lord in all of its little ways and the ways that it expresses itself in every facet of my life, dude, that can never get stamped out. Ever. And that's why I think the language of the gospel and death and resurrection, and even just the whole idea of new life, is so important because it's not an improvement thing. Like something needs to be crucified. Something needs to be crucified.
Yeah. Reform's not an option here.
And the announcement that there's nothing to do is the only potent thing that can turn our hearts away from trusting ourselves and onto another person. And so the people who are the loudest about, well, what are you saying? Like there's nothing to do and want to just argue for, various expressions of sanctification and improvement and, neighboring and loving and, all those other things. Dude, like you need to come face to face with your death, your crucifixion, and only the announcement that everything has already been done and there's nothing left for you to do is the only thing that might shut your mouth and look with sober eyes onto Jesus and his finished work.
Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. Right? That's
somewhere in the Bible.
Sentence, Proverbs 3:5, man, like that one was so like hang on the wall, like basic level, but no one gets it. None of us get it. We read that and we're just like, oh, it's above my head. I'm like, no. Understanding is the wrong category. Like it says lean not on your own understanding, because the thing that leads you to treat sin like a transaction and a transgression and a bad thing you did and a good thing needs to get done to fix it is because that false God that you're talking about, Russ, like we've painted God in our image by trying to validate him with our understanding.
Yeah,
that's
and then
why
we wonder why it doesn't work.
Has been that's why understanding has been thrown off the table by Paul. He just he clears the whole mess. He's like, I'm throwing it all on the floor, and I don't care how big the mess is. There's only one truth, and it's Jesus. Oh, and by the way, he's a Jew who got crucified.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Paul almost kind of brings up in his story like he had his own mind sync, with the other apostles. He was like, dude, like I only spent 15 days with Peter. Not only did I learn this from the risen Jesus for 3 years, like, dude, I went up to Jerusalem. It all got conferred, it all was corroborated. This is the gospel. So he's referencing the people, those who had authority in the community from which these dudes are coming down who are causing trouble. He's referencing the authority in their community too.
Yeah.
It's like the ultimate like checkmate for Paul. Again, it's his defense and his, argument.
And if you want to hear like how slippery of a slope this whole thing can be, Jameson, that verse you brought up in Proverbs, I can remember back in my cool church pastor days when I would wear like, I had the flat front khakis versus the pleated ones.
Ooh,
you know what I mean?
Boy,
I had to bring a little style to the staff. But back in them days, man, everybody played golf. And I pastor in this church, man, all these new people and connections, right? So I go out, man, learn how to play golf, and got me a golf bag, and they were like, dude, you should put like a Bible verse on it. So
Yes.
freaking stitched on the side of my golf bag, bro, as long as it was Proverbs 3:5-6. I'm walking around on these golf courses. Not long, because if you know me, golf's not my game.
Oh,
and
dude,
if you know my temperament,
you're breaking your clubs on hole 3.
I broke 3 clubs
right over the knee, chucking it right into the pond.
Chucked one, and let's go ahead and say I then turned to one dude who was walking by and I said, you like golf? He goes, yeah. And I said, how much money you got? He reached in his pocket. He goes, we got $105. I said, you can have this brand new bag and all these clubs for $105. He handed me the money. I handed him the bag and left. I ain't never played since. But here's what I'm laughing about. The irony in it is I'm out there sporting this bag, right, with this Bible verse, thinking the entire time, man, I'm not leaning on my own understanding.
Right.
I'm about the truth, bro. And what I was teaching and leading in, man, it was growing, multiplying, people coming around, right? Money coming in, every success marker you could hit, bro. And the whole time I was teaching everybody all the practicals, 3s to this and 5 to that and 7s to this, and what a real Christian is and isn't, and how to be a better this. And bro, you know what I didn't teach? The fundamental, unfiltered bedrock truth of the gospel with no but.
Yep.
And
I think the most tempting justification for people
nobody was.
Yeah, I think the fundamental most tempting justification is converts, followers, and the people in your pews.
Yeah, think this is the fruit.
Yeah, because Jesus even said it about the Pharisees. Dude, they'll travel from coast to coast for a convert, and then when they make a convert out of you, they'll celebrate you. They'll parade you around. And he's, I think he says even like, dude, you're making disciples of hell.
Yeah,
you're making disciples of hell. And so just that, like, these dudes out here, preaching a very, hidden performance based theology mixed with gospelisms. They're going to just constantly be pacified, in the Facebook comments, the claps, and the attendance. But Paul's standing alone, dude, in this letter. Really.
Yeah, which is a really bad way to make your case. So that tells you, with somebody who's as like legit as he is at communication and being a Pharisee and writing, like the dude's a genius. a
Oh, for
lot of
sure.
scholars agree that he's beyond like just a, pastor who had some things to like, he's top notch. So for him to make the case that he's made in Galatians and throughout his work is a little bit of a like conundrum. You're like, wait a second, you're basing everything on you not being able to prove it, right? Martin Luther says this.
Moving past this, he's got some heavy hitting arguments for sure. But it comes after this.
Yeah.
Martin Luther says in reference to verse 16, the gospel is nothing else but the revelation of the Son of God. And if you are on like listening to this conversation as somebody who's been in and through church your whole life, or a part of your life, or a long portion of it, you probably started to believe, whether it was intentional or not, by your church leadership, that your church leadership was the revelation of God. Now, I'm not saying God doesn't reveal himself through your church leadership.
I am.
Russ is. So
I'm just kidding. Keep going.
I'm an elder.
You have to listen.
You're a freaking dork, dude. That's what you are.
If it's only the revelation of the Son of God, which I'm telling you, if you argue with that, like, you're wrong. You cannot argue that the gospel is only one thing. It's nothing but the revelation of the Son of God. And where is that Son revealed? In you. By Jesus. Which means by no one else, and by nothing else, and nowhere else. This is such good news, because it means you're not like, if you're not bound by all of the ways that you've been told God demands that you come to him. You're not inhibited. You're not being given hurdles to jump over or hoops to jump through. If the gospel is the revelation of the Son of God and nothing else, as Martin Luther says, well, then that kind of makes sense with what Paul says in Romans 5, right? While we were still sinners, Christ died for the ungodly, right? While still sinners and ungodly in the same sentence, just to make sure you know when this happened. So
and how one-sided it was.
You can, how one-sided, like what you brought to the table was a whole lot of nothingness.
Right.
Yeah. And I've always found like the sweetest relationships, from coast to coast that we've met and I've met over the years. It's really just kind of one big mind meld, dude. You're just like, you meet other people who God was pleased to reveal the Son in them.
Yeah.
And we start to just share our stories, and all the people who are discovering, discovering again the true gospel. I think a lot of people started out with really like the Son revealing himself to them. And I think it got co-opted, by this, this donkey doctrine that we're seeing, prevalent everywhere. For sure that was me. Dude, within a month, I was a Pharisee.
Yeah, me too.
Within a month, dude. And I started off with just rejoicing, like heart melted, soft heart, like on cloud 9, right? I was, as Paul puts it in Galatians, you are running well in the good news of Jesus and the grace of God. And I was just happy to be forgiven, dude. I was just happy to have a clean conscience, to know that I was loved, to know that I was justified by faith alone. And I turned into a Pharisee within a month.
Yep. Yeah, I had what I love about all of this and what Paul's doing here is it really does set you free to live in a freedom you already have, right? The only freedom in this world that has ever or will ever be, the only freedom that you will never have to run down. That's what this revelation, right, does. But it also, it just kind of goes into stuff that we've already been talking about, but it puts things in the right perspective. It puts things in the right bucket now. Because now we can have conversations about things in the world and things that we do with our bodies, right? that can be beautiful, or it can be hurtful. Because sometimes people say, well, man, if all we ever do is talk about this, and there's just this constant fear of like bad behavior and the destruction that can bring, to people's lives. And we're like, yes, we get that. We're not dismissing that. Neither is the Apostle Paul. He's just saying that's a different conversation. And it's actually one that you're free to really enter into, and now free to embrace and to learn in and to walk in, because it's no longer a means by which you're justifying yourself. Now it's just, hey, this makes sense. This is smart. I should maybe do this with my bank account versus this. I should pursue this in my relationships versus this, because I keep doing this and I'm hurting people, but I don't have to any longer. They're not a project anymore. They're just a fellow person on an adventure of faith. And so I'm just saying, like, there's so many ramifications that come from the commitment to Jesus, right? As Luther said, the revelation, right, of God in you, the gospel.
Nothing
and
but
getting that clear and keeping it undefiled, man. It is paramount to your joy, to the joy of the world. It is paramount. So, quoting again Capon from like the first episode in Galatians, get a spirited horse called the gospel, and grab a hold of an ethical, of an ethical donkey. There's a place for it, but don't breed the two. Only a jackass does that.
Only a jackass would do it. Also too,
You'll
like,
lose the gospel.
Think about just practically the mission of LARK, to primarily move things, online, a podcast, some social media, some traveling. I think we're saying, the church is people, the global redeemed people of God, who God was pleased to reveal his son in them. And those who will, who have yet to believe. What I'm finding is, along with this, this gospel sanctification meld of a message that you're seeing around, also too, in that is a place that is really saying that God dwells in places made of human hands. They have, everything's about the building, everything's about the service, everything's about this hour and a half here, everything's about the programs, and this and that. And if you look at what Paul's saying, he revealed himself in me. I was on a freaking horse, dude. I was traveling. I was in a 1993 black Ford Ranger when God was pleased to reveal his son in me. And when you're in that world, dude, in the church world, dude, you think everything happens in there. And then you begin to market it. Like this church I have locally, we brought it up. Yes. Change happens here. Life is here.
Yeah.
You're saying God dwells in places made of human hands.
You make God your add-on.
Yeah. You added a but.
There's a verse that we can't skip in verse 16. You got
already a two-parter, dude, so go for it.
This is it. This won't take long. This
100%.
won't take long. If you guys, man, I'll just read it. Here's a translation of it. Verse 16 in chapter 1 of Galatians. It pleased the Father to reveal his Son in me, in order that I may proclaim him in the nations. Now, none of your Bibles will say that. Okay? Because in verse 16, and most of them won't say in at all. They'll say it pleased the Father to reveal his Son to me. In order that I may proclaim him to the nations.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, most of your Bibles will make a footnote for the first one that says or literally in. And you're like, whoa, okay. Why don't you just put that in then, right?
Yeah, seeing how that's what it says.
The catch. The word in the Greek right there that says reveal his Son in me is the exact same Greek word that says that I may proclaim him, what we say, to the nations. It's the exact same word. And I'm like, I mean, all of that exactness. It's the same word, which these words often do mean different things in different contexts. And you have to use the context to determine, well, which one is it, right? And I think you don't really get the gravity of this verse when you decide, like, yeah, I know, like, it said in the first time, maybe, right? Well, we might grant that. A lot of us don't still. I think you have to grant that one. But the second one, to say in the second time, it turns everything you know about church on its head. Because, like you said, we're trying to get them in and through our system. We are literally Judaizing them with Christianity. We're saying this thing that we do is what you have to be a part of. And I'm saying, no, that's just another religion. To call Christianity the thing you have to do or become a part of,
you just made it a religion.
You made it a religion, because the claim we've been talking about this whole conversation is that the gospel is Jesus. Period. Full stop. So, and no buts, no ands, no ifs, no clauses, no conditions, no contingencies. So I'll read it again. We should all change our Bibles to read it this way, at least in the margin. It pleased the Father.
Get this X-Acto knife out real quick.
It pleased the Father to reveal his Son in me, in order that I may proclaim him in the nations. I'm telling you, like, I had an experience so much like what you said, Russ, your story about sitting with that guy. And it all started shifting there, because I was like, wait a second. I'm just like this guy. He just unloaded all his crap, and he's really looking to me for something too. And I'm like, I had the same moment, brick wall, where I was like, yeah, I got nothing. I can't fix what you got. Although it's not really different from my story. So maybe you need solidarity. And then in that solidarity, that's one of the clearest moments that I feel like revelation happened, because I was like, you're all, like, Jesus is already doing this in you. He's there. He's already there. Like, I don't have to get him there. I don't have to
even be
you.
in this conversation.
Yes.
But that was not true.
Wow. Like, that changes how I look at this guy now. It changes how I look at me. And now this isn't a like relationship like this. No, it's like this. We're the same, on the same level, because we are both equally subject without solicitation. We did not solicit Jesus for the gospel. We are both subject to the fact that we are in him. That changes everything.
In our recent getting canceled from a denomination for sharing these truths, I remember being in this meeting with a handful of the leaders, and they were just really fighting, Jameson, the core of what you just brought up in that verse, right? Which can also point to a myriad of other verses in Colossians 1 and Colossians 3.
A plethora.
Yes, better, a myriad. And anyhow, multitude. I remember talking with this dude about, like, look, you guys are everything you do is designed to get people into a system that you call Christianity, and therefore God now loves them, will move in their lives, and they belong. We're trying to help people awaken to the Christ who already lives in them. This is what you see the Apostle Paul doing and declaring. And he goes, that's blasphemous. And it was one of those moments, Jameson, where you're kind of stuck there, right? You're going, man, like, my brain's running in 1,000 directions. Where do I go here? And this was recently. And I looked at this panel and I said, all right. I said, out of curiosity, you guys, are you charismatic? And of course, we're like, no. We definitely believe God can do miracles, but we're not charismatic. Like, we're not running around saying that God's like talking audibly to us, where he speaks and the clouds part and everybody stops and everyone can hear what he's saying. I'm like, so that you don't believe that? Well, of course not. How did you become a Christian? Well, the Lord spoke to me. The Lord spoke to you. So, like, audibly, he talked to you, like, through the clouds. Every one of these guys, one by one. No, he didn't talk to me audibly. So then what do you mean he spoke to you? Well, like, he was just really moving in my life and speaking to me about, like, things of, like, sin and truth. And it was like, in this process, like, I by faith, I believed. That's where the union came about. That's when I came into Jesus and Jesus came into me. I'm like, but that didn't happen audibly. No. So then how did you hear him? Well, it came from, and bro, it was like you could hear a pin drop. I said, it was what? I said, go ahead, say it. What was
Say
it?
the word. Say
Say
the
it.
word.
And he goes, well, it came from within.
Within.
Oh, came from within. Yep. And then one guy, naturally, the king of the buts there goes, but that was just the Spirit of God. I'm like, oh, so the Spirit's separate. There's
Right.
multiple gods.
Yeah.
Well, no, the Trinity, the doctrine of Trinity, one God. I'm like, so then the Spirit, that's God, right? Yeah. And he was where? Talking to you audibly or spoke to you from within? Well, from within, but like, it's because he like, he showed up. I'm like, oh, so he just kind of like pokes in and out of your life at times. Like pokes his head in.
Who's the blasphemer now?
And then yeah. But I'm just saying, like, it was this, like, you could tell, man, there was this, like, this digging in of the heels of like, this takes control out of my hands. This even starts to undermine the entire position that I have achieved in this world and over the lives of people, my very sense of security, right? Man, you get, not only can we look at all the things that we've discussed and see like why the drift, but you get even that like hard-hearted, fear-driven sort of rejection, you know what I mean, of this reality. And it's just, well, I'll end with this, man. All the evidence you need is the fact, Jameson, that we have to go to our Bibles and we have to write the word in that verse, even though in the Greek, that's what it says.
Yep. I don't think Paul accidentally,
there's your evidence,
was unclear. I think that's not hard to figure out. And, this means that I think there's two kinds of people that we're super passionate about at Lark. And you can correct this if I'm wrong. This might be the only two types of people there are in the world. We're going to go there. There's the kind of people who feel like they're crazy because they're taking the grace of Jesus seriously. That's one group. There's those people. They're like, I feel like I'm crazy for doing this. And the other ones feel alone because they actually need an outrageous kind of grace. You're one of those two people, which means Jesus is the good news that Jesus is in you. And that's the objectively true baseline foundation truth for all truth. That's good news. You can just ask him. You don't have to get him there. You don't have to make him be there. You don't have to get him in anybody else. You can just ask. Like, help me believe. Are you?
Yep. And help others believe. In other words, tell others this good news and invite them to ask.
Damn good news.
This really does change everything. Cheers, homie.
Cheers.
Cheers to you fools.